On the hunt for comfortable, timeless Western boots? You already know the best place to shop for quality boots is at your local Tacova store. So stop by Tacova's Nashville, at the Mall at Green Hills, or on Broadway by Ryman Auditorium. That's right, you now have 2 locations to choose from. Grab a cold one as you shop and get fitted by a pro. Tacova's Nashville is at your service, and you can find your perfectly fitted dream boots with the help of their expert staff. Everyone will be asking where you got your sick new boots, but I won't be asking because I know they must be Tacova's. That's TECOVAS.com. Don't go gently, y'all. Today on CityCast Nashville, I'm here with Tennessee State Senator Heidi Campbell to talk about the growth of white supremacy that we're seeing in Nashville. This is a global issue, but downtown Nashville specifically is drawing attention for the 3 white supremacist demonstrations we've seen in just this year alone. We actually recorded this episode after the demonstration on July 6th, but just last weekend we had more Nazis downtown. That's 2 weeks in a row. We're here to talk about why this is happening in Nashville specifically, and what this means for the future of our city. CityCast Nashville is presented by our exclusive launch sponsor, Tacova's. It's July 17th, I'm Grace Fuse, and this is what Nashville's talking about. Thank you so much for coming on, Senator Campbell. I just want to ask to start off, what is Christian nationalism?
So Christian nationalism is basically, it's bifurcated into 2 types. It's the New Apostolic Reformation and the Christian Reconstructionism faction. But either way, both of them are about using Christianity to control voters, and also that we should be a Christian nation and that Christians are favored by God. So it's problematic because if you have wealthy people doing better than poor people, that's because God chose those people to be wealthy.
It's a confirmation bias thing.
It's a confirmation bias, exactly. It's a very powerful weapon.
What is the difference, if any, between Christian nationalism and white nationalism?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I mean, Christian nationalism is using Christianity to try and manipulate people to, really, it's about power. It has nothing to do with the tenets of Christianity. I think that Christian nationalism and white nationalism, you can conflate them. I mean, they're very much, if you saw the Venn diagram of those 2 things, I think the circles would overlap significantly. But Christian nationalism has been specifically rooted in leveraging Christianity to get people to come over to the side of far-right ideology.
And it's obviously very much not a new thing to be using Christian concepts for such a thing.
Yes.
So today, how does white nationalism show up in Nashville beyond these Nazi demonstrations that we had this year, both this month and in February?
Well, so I wasn't surprised to see this Nazi march in Nashville, which is, the second one we've seen this year. And the Patriot Front, that group, are the perfect example of a group that's leveraging Christian nationalism to try to get people on board with their agenda. Tennessee is particularly vulnerable to that. I mean, 81% of Tennesseans identify as Christians, and it's important to understand that 1/3 of Christians identify as Christian nationalists. So this is a very vulnerable environment for that sort of thing that has been fortified by far-right media and a political agenda in our state that has really supported adherence of Christian nationalism. And we have people moving here for that reason.
So when we talk about like Christian or conservative media, what does that look like in Nashville?
I actually, before I came to this interview, I just wanted to double check and make sure I was correct about this. So I looked up the major news stations in Nashville and just made sure that they are all owned by hedge funders who support Trump. And Trump, of course, is supported by the Christian nationalists, and they're who brought him to power. When you look at Project 2025, and for your listeners out there who don't know what that is, please take some time to look that up and learn a little bit about it. But it's not fringe. It's very much the mainstream intent of the current Republican Party. It's very clear that these national corporations that have taken over all of the local journalism have definitely done so in Nashville. And that's also the case with Gannett, with our newspaper, the Tennessean, which is also owned by mostly people who are supporting the Republican Party.
Is this about becoming a conservative city or about being a MAGA city? Is there a difference there?
I am so glad you asked that question because I really do think that we can no longer call this current iteration of the Republican Party conservative. It really doesn't have anything to do with conservatism. I was thinking about what is going on just in terms of, the divide that we see in our country. And I was thinking about it in terms of a patient, like a hospital patient. And I was thinking, you know, we all agree that there are problems. We see, problems with our environment, problems with crime, problems with homelessness and affordability. But this Christian nationalist group has decided just to identify the symptoms and infer the cure. And the cure, of course, is Christian nationalism. Whereas I would say that if we were really going to look at what led us to this point, what's really causing us this dis-ease, that it's actually greed. It's corporate greed. We have made decisions along the way that have catalyzed prioritizing corporate interests and shareholder interests over the interests of the people that we serve.
What did corporations get out of this financially?
Well, I mean, they get a lot out of it because, when we look at big oil, for example, big oil is not just the gas for our cars or our airplanes. It's also, of course, our home energy, and it's also plastics. It's just permeating every part of our lives. They have worked really, really hard against environmentalism because, quite frankly, they don't make as much money. Christian nationalism is a wonderful vehicle to be able to get rid of regulations, and that's specifically a component of their platform.
It's interesting. I have a lot of ideas about what a MAGA value and push would mean for lawmaking and bills, but I honestly had not thought about environmentalism and greed and financial profit and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But why do you think there's a rise in these demonstrations in Nashville specifically? Because we talk about Nashville being a blue dot. Why not somewhere else that is a red dot? I don't understand why it's here.
Yeah, right. That's alarming. And I think it's important to understand that Nashville is targeted to be our first big conservative Christian nationalist city by a lot of these dominionists. Dominionist is just another word for Christian nationalism. They think that it's time for there to be big major cities that are not blue, and they want Nashville to be the first big red city. And, that's been a lot of what we up at the legislature have been dealing with in terms of protecting Nashville when it comes to the stadium and the convention authority and all of these fights that we have been having with the state. They really want to control those things because they really want to control our city. And it's important for people to understand that that means that they really want a theocracy. And that sounds crazy, but, we got an email in the legislature just a couple weeks ago from one of the House members asking if we knew, if any of us, it was to everybody, if any of us had information on the Louisiana 10 Commandments law, because they wanted to run it next year, and they will. They're going to run it. And, we see women's reproductive rights being taken away. We see all of this anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ legislation. All of that is serving the purpose of theocratic leadership in our state. And I would argue that we're already a totalitarian state. So, Tennessee is the tip of the spear when it comes to the war on democracy. And this is exactly where people should be looking nationally and internationally to see how that's playing out and how it's working. And we are in the unique position as Nashvillians of being on the front lines of this, and how we deal with this, I think, will have a huge effect on democracy. Sounds dramatic, but globally.
I'm here with Senator Heidi Campbell, and I just want to backtrack for a second. What is the Louisiana 10 Commandments law? Because that sounds dystopian. And how would that affect Nashville?
Yeah, so in Louisiana, they passed a law to require the 10 Commandments be put in every school, and I think in every classroom on the wall. And that's obviously problematic for people who do not subscribe to Christianity. But, it's also that requirement, that separation of the separation of church and state. This is not really about ideology. It's about control. It's otherizing anybody who is not a part of this dominionist philosophy. And I think a lot of Christian people are not really aware of that, and they conflate Christianity with Christian nationalism, and they think that opposition to it is opposition to Christianity. And it's quite the opposite. I mean, we can't, one thing that's been great about the American experiment is that we know that it is true freedom of religion, where we accept everybody and whatever their religious ideologies may be, that allows us the freedoms that we have. And it filters into a lot of aspects of our life, like, we were talking about earlier, like environmentalism and women's rights and immigrant rights. And, the idea really inevitably is to have a white Christian nation.
I'm having a hard time with the mental image of the Ten Commandments next to a kindergarten chore chart or whatever. That is bizarre.
We got to make sure that 5-year-olds aren't coveting their neighbors' wives.
We do need to make sure. I want to make sure that they know that. I'm just picturing it like having the same kind of vibe as your class rules, where it says to raise your hand when you need to potty or whatever. It's like, that's such a weird disconnect.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's alarming.
Yeah. So we have people moving to Nashville every day from blue states. What would you say to liberals who are moving to Tennessee who might not be familiar with this kind of environment?
I think it's important that they pay attention. People are so civically disengaged in general. It's not a Tennessee thing. I would say a global thing, but certainly a U.S. thing. And I went to school recently to do a government class, and there was a high schooler that did a presentation. She'd gone around her school and asked people, the janitor, the cooks in the kitchen, students, teachers, everybody, who is your state senator? Who is your rep? Who is your U.S. senator? And all across the board, didn't matter how educated they were, didn't matter what their role was, they didn't know. Very few of them knew who was representing them. And the far right has leveraged that to their advantage, because the Southern strategy over the past, 30 or 40 years, they have taken over our councils, our school boards, and our state legislatures. That certainly happened here, where it wasn't that long ago that we were a Democratic majority. And now we are a super minority. Democrats are. I am one of 6 senators in a body of 33. So really, we don't even have to be here for there to be a quorum for votes. And so I think it's important that people who move here understand that civic engagement is a responsibility, because we really are detached from the decisions that are being made. And it's almost to the point, as we can see with this upcoming election, where we could lose everything.
So we're talking a little bit about this political apathy that's kind of letting this keep going. Do you think that our low voter turnout is because voters are being suppressed, or is it more that we just have people that take their politics for granted coming from maybe other blue states, and so they just don't care that much about being civically involved?
Yeah, both. I mean, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think that we make it really hard to vote. And I also think that people feel apathetic because they feel like, especially in a state like Tennessee, when you look at the turnout and the votes, that it's kind of baked in, that it's a foregone conclusion for the most part. There are very few real competitions when we look at races in this state. But we do so to our detriment, because we are dead last. We are 51st after DC for voter turnout. We have a lot of voters registered, but we don't have people showing up to the polls. And yes, we do make it hard, but it is so important that people, go out and talk to people they don't normally talk to groups. We're raised not to talk about politics and religion, but we need to talk about politics and religion.
So a lot of this is connecting with your neighbors, talking to new people, kind of raising some awareness. I mean, I guess getting people mad is a good way to get people to vote. And talking about things is a good way to get mad.
It's true. And, we don't have to get stuck up on the ideological issues that have been used to divide us, because I think everybody cares about affordability, for example. And it's important that people know that the state of Tennessee is hoarding their tax dollars and not putting their tax dollars that they're required to put in to programs. They're not doing that. Our TANF fund, which is Tennessee Assistance for Needy Families, is over $800 million right now that we have in the bank. And we're required by law not to let that go over $128 million. So that's just one example of many examples where we're such a regressive state that we are not investing in Tennesseans, but hoarding that money because we're actually going to be putting that into, and that comes back to part of this religious stuff, religious programs. And we just gave $1.6 billion back to corporations of our tax dollars for no reason. It was a voluntary thing that the legislature decided to do. I, of course, voted against that, and my Democratic colleagues did.
We're talking about the stadium, right?
No, we're talking about a $1.6 billion tax refund that we voluntarily decided to give this past year to mostly 80% of out-of-state corporations, because they were saying that this could be a lawsuit because we had a bifurcated corporate tax structure. But that's indefensible. Nobody's ever done that. It was a decision that the state made, frankly, just because they wanted to make their friends and buddies happy. And maybe some of my colleagues even actually benefited from it financially.
So we know that November is a crucial election. We're currently in the middle of early voting for the August 1st primary. Is there anything people can vote for locally in this primary that will help push back against all this?
People running for U.S. Senate, Marsha Blackburn's seat is up. I think it's so important to go choose your candidate for that race in the Democratic primary. There are 2 congressional races in Nashville, actually 3, but 2 that are very strong, with 2 strong women running on the Democratic side, because we divided Nashville up into 3 congressional districts last cycle. And we have a Republican who is running against the incumbent in Tennessee's 5th district. And we hear from a lot of Democrats that are thinking about switching parties and voting for the Republican in that one. And do not do that. That is so important that we vote for Democrats. The Republican who is running is anti-choice, pro-MAGA, pro-guns, and certainly no better than the incumbent. And it's important that we support Democrats. And then, I think just paying attention to, some of these races that are going to be coming down the pike a little bit earlier than right before you're about to vote.
So if we don't vote, if nothing changes, where does this take us?
Well, I think that, I flipped the first seat that we flipped in 20 years, 4 years ago, and that's heading in the right direction. I think that we need to hang on to this seat, and I think we need to flip some more seats. It's hard work, and it can be exhausting, but we see, I had a friend, close friend, leave the state. She loves Nashville. She grew up here because she has a trans child. We have doctors leaving our state because they don't feel like they can practice their profession safely because of all of the onerous laws that we're passing. We are really, really seeing shifts in livability and affordability because of our policies. And so I think it couldn't be more important to actually get civically engaged and start to pay attention, if you're not paying attention, to who's leading.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Senator Campbell. We really appreciate it. And thank you for all of your hard work.
Of course. Absolutely. Thank you for doing CityCast. I love it.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye!